you, and thank you for joining our panel discussion where we'll be talking about child safety online. Now, whilst this session is called Child Safety Online, I think it's worthwhile pointing out that these topics don't just affect children. Adults, particularly vulnerable adults, also experience some of the issues that we'll be discussing. And also, before I introduce our panel for today, I just wanted to mention that during the course of the session, we might discuss sensitive topics that could act as a trigger to people who have experienced trauma in early years. So if you do find that you are affected by anything that we discuss, we are offering resources on our event page, which can be found on the Cybersecurity Month Connective page. And don't forget, we also have our employee assistance program that is in place to help you. So do look that up. You can also find that via the event page or by searching on Connective. So without further ado, I think it's time we met our panel for today. So Stuart, welcome. Can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, thanks. I'm Stuart Brown. I am a cybersecurity specialist. I've been in tech for over 30 years, working in all different types of companies, small, medium and large, on loads of different technologies. I'm also, on a personal level, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, which is how our company was founded 2 or 3 years ago. So my wife will mention more about that later. We set up child safe online services to predominantly protect children online through alternative technologies than parental controls, using a cloud-based VPN service. In addition to that, this year, because of COVID, we sort of pivoted the business as well to include a virtual safe place, which is a safe online video system for delivery of safe content to children. And something else we'll be talking about later, which is our virtual Santa offering for later this year.
Thank you, Stuart, much appreciated. And I'll hand over to Julie for an introduction on yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Julie Brown. I'm Stuart's wife. I'm director and the founder, really, of Child Safe. I supported Stuart going through 3 years of complete mental health breakdown and saw the trauma that it caused, the problems it caused, working, trying to cope with so many different things going on, delays within court cases. And whilst this was going on, I became very aware of, obviously, there is an awful lot of online abuse that's now coming out. So as Stuart progressed and became better, I asked him if he would use his skills to be able to protect children more online. So that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you, Julie, appreciated. And Sam, over to you for an introduction, please.
Hiya, I'm Sam Campbell. I run the social media accounts for Child Safe, and I write content for safer internet guides that we provide for parents, for schools, anyone who needs really tips and advice about different aspects of the internet. I do research into different websites and sort of among other things. I worked as a teacher for 7 years, and I've been working with vulnerable children for about 15 years, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Much appreciated. And last but not least, Simon.
Thank you, Ben. Simon Newman. I'm head of cyber and business services for an organisation called Police Crime Prevention Initiatives. So we help businesses and individuals reduce their vulnerability to a variety of different crime types, including cyber, which is a recent area for us to move in. I'm also the father of 2 girls, aged 13 and 8. So online safety is a really important issue to me on a personal level, as well, of course, during my day-to-day work life as well. And my background, mostly policing, law enforcement, spent most of my career working in some capacity around crime prevention, both here and overseas.
Thank you everybody for the introduction. So we'll kick off with the first question. So some of the common things we're seeing online nowadays, and those kind of things could be particularly dangerous to children. Are you able to kind of elaborate on some of these risks and dangers, and perhaps point out some of the red flags that parents can watch out for? I'm going to start with yourself, Stuart, if that's okay.
Sure. I think the one that most people are familiar with is obviously children having access to adult content online as being the one of the sort of probably easiest danger to be aware of. However, the stories that are coming out across the globe really are about younger and younger children being exposed to this type of content online and becoming either being introduced by siblings, via friends, family, whatever. But it's also a driver that in sort of predatory online grooming behaviours, that these sorts of things get invited to, children to be take part in. And one of the other big areas is sort of which you probably don't obviously sort of first of all put at the prime is social media and the influencers that are on social media. I mean, the subjects we're really talking about here cover a huge breadth of vulnerabilities within children and mental health, and that's to do with body image, that's to do with with bullying online, to do with self-image, and bullying. The list can go on, and a lot of this is through social media, a lot of it's through influencers, and a lot of it through the likes of YouTube and people accessing age inappropriate content is one of the biggest drivers to people and young children being confused not only by their own identity, but they're also by their what they should and shouldn't be accessing. So and one of the prime communication mediums for predatory behavior online is led by any apps that allow a one-to-one communication or group communication through chats, through things like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, all these things that young children shouldn't be exposed to, but are, because invariably many parents do not restrict the what children have access to, and in many cases parents don't actually understand what those children could access. You give a child a smartphone, what do they have access to? Well, everything an adult has access to invariably, without putting in some controls. So I think those are the sort of three main areas, but obviously there's a whole string of other areas that are involved, and probably Sam has got some different perspectives from working with these kind of children.
Excellent, thank you, Stuart. And Sam, I'm going to hand over to you, in which case, if you'd like to add your comments to that, please.
Yeah, with what Stuart was saying about social media, there is that pressure for likes and to look a certain way, and it definitely opens up young people to pushing themselves further than they should be going. For example, the number of instances of children harming themselves or producing inappropriate content for apps like TikTok, because that's what the algorithms are pushing, and it's the way to get popular. So there is that, and it's creating some real mental health concerns. It's really become an issue, especially recently. But that creation of content is also becoming a real issue with underage children. They're using platforms that they shouldn't be using, but there aren't those protections. They say, are you over the age that you're 13? It is for most social networks, and that's it. That's all the verification that's in place is, are you over 13? And children will always find ways around things that they're not supposed to be using. Children are always going to be ahead of parents with technology. So no matter what you put in place, and there is a lack of protection in terms of parental controls being completely inadequate, and parents don't necessarily realise that. There are a lot of ways around parental controls and other things that parents put in place and schools put in place that's really I think it gives parents a false sense of security to how protected their children are online, when actually they're not at all with these systems in place. And I mean, grooming is one of the issues that, you know, we talk about again and again, and it's always in the news. There's the high profile cases like Breck Bednar, and you know, it's really, parents really need to understand that children can be accessed by people in so many different ways, through games, through chat sites, through social media, and they, you know, children open themselves up to a lot of risk because they don't understand the consequences of what they're doing. And I think that's one of the main issues, is that lack of understanding, the lack of cyber awareness on the part of children and their parents. And it is just educating, because you're never going to stop children from doing things unless you can put something very physically in place.
Can I just add in there, from a child's perspective, there's an element that you trust adults. And there's also this element that if you're allowed on the internet, then you trust the internet. There's just this inherent thing as a small child, as you grow up, you are the boundaries, etc., that you grow up with have a huge influence on what you can and who you get involved with and who you do trust. And that's very difficult online to assess who's on the end of the other line, i.e. Communication through chat, through video, through whatever mechanisms. So, you know, the inherent thing is, and the earlier children you know, start to use the internet, obviously the less they understand about what they are trusting.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think you both made some really good points there about people having access to children now via the internet. And I guess that's something that has changed over the years. So which leads kind of perfectly to the next question, actually. I was going to ask, how has our use of the internet changed and children's use of the internet changed? And I'm going to hand over to you, Simon, if you'd like to add some comments to that one.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I mean, I think the simple answer is it's changed massively over the last few years. I quite often enjoy sitting down with my kids and showing them the technology that I grew up with as they try and work out how to get the internet on one of my old phones that looks and resembles like a brick. But the reality is, you know, in certainly the last 5 years, kids are using the internet more and more. Obviously, we've seen with COVID-19 and the lockdown, children having to use the internet and technology to participate in lessons, speaking to their friends, etc. So on that level, it's changed massively. We're also seeing a huge rise in the number of devices, of course, that now are capable of connecting to the internet. And that can be everything from, of course, mobile phones, tablets and laptops that we see, to children's toys increasingly, all with some form of internet capability. So they're using it as every part of their life. And it's becoming much more prominent than it has done at any time before, and that's a direction of travel that inevitably I think will continue. The other thing I think is really interesting about how our internet changes as well is that we're starting to see, I guess, government having this dilemma about how to deal with it. With more and more technology, with more and more use of the internet, and we have one of the highest uses of smartphones in the world. You know, government has a really tricky situation in terms of how do you balance the needs and the safety of the user versus the commercial opportunities that are out there, and the way that technology can arguably improve the way that we live our lives. And of course, the government has so far not gone down the route of legislating or regulating much in terms of technology. They kind of allow the market to govern itself, but it does create a huge challenge going forward, and particularly with young people, you know, inevitably technology will become second nature to them. In fact, many of the things that they've done, you know, without technology will no longer exist. And I think it was quite interesting the other day, going back to the original point on phones, is that if we think when we were growing up, that was the sign that we used to make when someone was on the phone. Kids these days have it like this, and I think that just shows how technology changes, and it changes our behaviour as well. So it's changed massively.
Very interesting, thank you. And yeah, I certainly like the idea of changing to that as opposed to that. It's yeah, very interesting. And Julie, do you have any thoughts and comments on that at all?
Just mainly on the fact that younger and younger children are encouraged to use devices now. We have coding classes for 3-year-olds. So straight away you're putting a device into their hands at a very, very young age. And possibly without any parental control set at all. We've come across quite a few things where, you know, children have admitted they know how to remove these parental controls. They are able to do that, and that's if they have been put in place. I think, you know, it's really important that we start to look at ways of being able to control a lot more of this. There's going to be a huge influx in years to come of online grooming. It can't not. It concerns me that, you know, if you see a post on Facebook where it says, oh, children, you know, look after your children, be aware there's a white van hanging around a school, but yet you put them on the internet and you leave them free to talk to anybody, and children, even adults, fall prey to all these scams and everything. So how are we ever going to stop children falling to them without putting things in place to stop them being able to do this?
There's one other thing, Ben, I just want to add, and in fact, Julie's made a really good point there, and I think she's actually right in terms of younger children. But, you know, what we're also seeing are criminals who are aware of the fact that children are becoming much more tech savvy, and we're seeing criminals recruit children to carry out crime, which is a really quite worrying trend. Now, you know, we talk about education awareness, and that's absolutely key, and I think we'll come on to that later on in the discussion. But, you know, it's inevitably going to happen that with kids becoming more tech savvy, criminals realise that they can be used then to commit some forms of crime. And we're seeing hackers becoming younger and younger each year, and they're able to exploit systems because a lot of security isn't particularly great. I hear regularly of cases where school children are hacking into their own school systems, and it may not be for malicious reasons. It's just because they're bored and they want to watch Netflix, but by doing so they're committing quite serious criminal offences, and it creates a real challenge. So I think what we also have to be very careful of is, while it's great, and Julie's absolutely right, that we get kids involved in tech, we have a huge skill shortage in cybersecurity in this country, we also have to be very careful about not giving them the skills that then goes on to lead to becoming a criminal in that particular area. So it's another really important area that we need to think about.
Thanks, Simon. And just kind of off the cuff, I mean, what kind of measures are law enforcement kind of putting in place are they creating programs for education in this space and to help children that find themselves in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing is trying to intervene at the earliest stage possible, and often through a lack of resources or a lack of understanding of the area, it's not always possible. What has been trialled in a number of areas around the country to some success is actually using the same approaches that we use to de-radicalise terrorists as a way of encouraging children to become more proactive in their use of cybersecurity skills. So what we want them to do is to spot and identify people who are really gifted in technology and actually encourage them to work for policing, the government, or organisations like Stewart's, where we can get them to be very proactive and helpful towards keeping people safe. So there is some work going on at the moment. We've got a cyber first scheme as well, which tries to get younger people involved in technology for the right reasons. But like anything, it's a big challenge, and we'll never be able to get to everyone. And arguably peer pressure and other groups around, of course, are trying to influence children to use their skills for the wrong purposes. Yeah,
very interesting. Thank you very much. So, Stuart, I mean, in your introduction, you mentioned about your virtual Santa activities, and obviously Christmas just around the corner. We've seen some of these pop up online, and I'm sure not all of them have the best intentions in the world. So could you just give us a little bit of an understanding about what these kind of activities are and how you can find out whether or not these are reputable services, and any kind of warning flags that you can kind of give to parents to look out for, please?
Well, I mean, the idea behind Virtual Santa is really our own implementation of the checks and balances that should really be put in place to provide video services to children online, either on a one-to-one basis or on a one-to-many basis. There's currently no legal framework that you have to work in a traditional environment where you may, you know, if you take Santa, for example, with the Santa's Grotto, you know, the Santa providing the Grotto service has to be DBS checked. They have to be have had safeguarding training. The organisation that's employed them have got contractual obligations, etc., with providing that service to children. Take the internet. There are no rules. There is no legislation in this country. There is no. So when you look at these kind of services where after all, Santa's actually in disguise. So actually determining who the person is who's providing it is very difficult. So when you look at a Santa service, for example, you need to look at, is it a legitimate company? You know, do they exist on the company's house? Are there any identities behind the company? Because, you know, and this goes not just for these kind of services, but all services on the internet where, you know, you see lots of things online and, you know, this is cheap or that's cheap. And invariably there's a reason, because the identity of who's selling it is hidden or covert or unobtainable. So, and obviously with children involved in a service like this, or any, you know, kids parties online, characters online, then knowing that you know the company and the people behind it are legitimate, they've got, you know, they have safeguarding training, they have DBS checks, they have technology checks, as in that they're proficient in using the technology and it's set up securely and correctly to allow a safe environment for children to participate. You know, there's, you know, over COVID, there's been so many examples of things like Zoom bombing, where, you know, illegitimate access to you know, classrooms or to any type of online conference. You know, the advertising of usernames and passwords to access these kind of things is just wrong. So there's a lot of checks and balances that you can go through, you need to go through really, to make sure that you're getting an enhanced and a proper service and your children are going to be safe. The other side, which I think Sam will mention more about, is about the data collection. I'll mention from a technical point of view in terms of, you know, GDPR data protection, that you know, people give away, you know, with Santa, they give away the children's identity, they give away some of the favorite details so that Santa can talk to them. You know, this is also prime hunting ground for getting information about children and then potentially targeting them at a later date. So Sam, if you want to mention any more about that kind of thing.
Yeah, so in terms of the information that you could be providing to one of these services, in terms of social engineering, you are giving your child's name, their date of birth, you're providing, probably as a parent, your own full name. From a scamming point of view, that then makes it very easy to find you on Facebook, where you may have pictures of your child in their school uniform. I now know where the child goes to school. I know what their name is. I know who their friends are. I know things about them that I can use to make myself seem trustworthy to that child. So it's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of information that people need to be proving that they're not using in any other way than what they're saying they are. And it's quite scary, really, the sort of information that people are freely giving to people without checks, you know, because it's Santa. You're just sort of assuming that they're checked and they're doing the right thing.
So what advice would you give to parents who are considering signing up to one of these activities?
Check.
Check.
Do your checks.
Okay. And the kind of checks that you would make is, are they a legitimate company? Are there any kind of DBS records available online? Is that possible, or is that something that's just still missing in this space?
No, you can't check. I mean, obviously you can check validity of limited companies that are on Companies House, etc. But in terms of DBS checks, no, you can't check that who's providing something is giving it. I mean, this is the difference between the online world and the outline world, where you know, companies legally have to go through various hoops to ensure that their employees, you know, you're covered by employee liability, you've got employers liability, you've got, you know, that you follow all those checks and balances, and you need to, if you're going to engage a service like this on the internet, you need to be able to be reassured that they do that. And what you can check what you can check as well is, are they registered with the Information Commissioner's Office? Do they have an ICO number? And I don't phone them up. Do they have a phone number on the website? Do they you can check their domain records on the internet, whether they have other sort of, often these kind of data capture services have multiple websites that are all sort of linked, and they all look familiar, similar in various elements to capture. Invariably there's a lot of kids website or supposedly kids focused websites that do exactly that, aimed at different age groups. So you check out the company and check out the business that's offering the service as much as you can. And it's the same as if you were buying a service locally. Do they have a reputation?
Great advice, thank you.
Can I just come in there, Ben? I agree with Stuart. There's just two things I would add to that, and I think he just covered one of those there. But for me, the first thing I would do is ask to see a copy of their safeguarding policy and ask them to explain how they are meeting that policy. So what processes, procedures have they put in place to ensure that policy is followed by everyone involved in some form of online activity? And the second thing is about testimonials. Now, I know, there is some risk around that, but I would always say if you ask for testimonials and then you ask to speak to the people who've provided those testimonials, follow them up. And it just gives you a slightly better way of understanding, hopefully, whether it is legitimate or not. And of course, if it is a legitimate business, they shouldn't have any issues whatsoever in providing you that information. If they're reluctant to do it, that sends a red flag to me, and I'd be a little bit concerned about it.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. And lastly on this topic, Julie, what's your organisation doing in this area?
Well, we are actually providing virtual Santas, but we are obviously only supplying them with DBS checks and all safeguarding put in place, training for using the service properly. So, obviously it doesn't just apply to Santas, because these are going out for people for birthday wishes with characters and everything. So it does apply to everything, and even on teaching. There's a lot of people setting up teaching yoga online, origami, all these different things, singing online, storytelling, but do we know who they are? Anyone, absolutely anybody can set up online teaching with no safeguarding in place at all. This later on is just going to be, it's going to be a huge emergence of people that have been abused online, because what the criminals do is look for the first vulnerability. And it is going to be children online at the moment, I'm afraid, with so many things that aren't available to do. Online is all wide open.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a key point, because the current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, people are operating more and more online. So, I mean, in terms of how COVID's affected everything, can you perhaps give a few of your insights into this, Simon? You must have seen how activities changed since the start of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's had a dramatic impact, as you'd expect with something like a pandemic leading to a lockdown. I think one of the things we've seen is obviously there was a very sudden move to get people to work remotely and live their lives online, and that caught a few people by surprise. Certainly, I think technology necessarily wasn't in place. People hadn't really thought about how they might mitigate some of those risks. And certainly there was perhaps a lack of education and awareness in terms of how to keep people safe online when people were expected, particularly children, to do their lessons remotely as opposed to being face to face. So that created obviously a great opportunity for criminals to exploit people's perhaps lack of knowledge in this area. And we're starting to see now some of the statistics coming through from that, which I think in the next few months we'll have a much clearer picture on. But clearly any form of incident or any major change to the way we live our lives, criminals are usually one step ahead, and they will always be looking at where there's an opportunity to exploit. And COVID has been a great opportunity for them to do that. I think people are now becoming slightly more informed and better aware, because this seems to be the new normal, and for the foreseeable future, this is I expect how we will pretty much live our lives. Whilst many schools have gone back to normal, we know that they are only perhaps a few days away from arguably being sent back down onto a lockdown again. So we have to keep up. We have to make sure that we continue to educate and raise awareness. And I think that's probably the most important thing for me here. It's about having those conversations with people, both children and vulnerable adults as well, in terms of what those risks are. And again, working with the schools, and it's a huge variety of how schools have adapted to this. Very fortunate our local primary school here has been really, really good in terms of how they've looked at security. But having a conversation with the teachers in terms of, okay, if we're going now to more of a remote way of working and we're expecting children to dial into Zoom lessons or Teams meetings, what steps are you taking? How are you safeguarding the children under your supervision? What are you doing? What steps are you taking? How can we be reassured? And I think those are some simple questions that every parent and every family should be asking to make sure that they're satisfied that there aren't too many risks for their children by being online.
And schools are doing the best they can, aren't they? And we mustn't forget that. And it's very challenging for them as well. So it's it's a tricky situation. And Sam, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, if that's possible, please.
Yeah, I mean, definitely sort of coming from a teaching background, there's a lot of teachers who don't have those tech skills. In school, just simple daily things that you need to do with smart boards and with computers in computer suites and things, and not all teachers are equipped to deal with that. So suddenly throwing them into a situation where they're expected to do the same job they were doing, but suddenly the children they're teaching are potentially on other things at the same time, and children are very sly. They found lots of ways around, setting their backgrounds as videos of them paying attention, because if you've got 30 little faces on your screen, who's going to notice one child who's not actually there, and it's very difficult. I do not I would not want to be in that position at the moment that teachers are in. It's completely new. It's a completely new just place to be for teachers, and and they were still teaching in school as well. So it's been difficult, and I feel very sorry for all my former colleagues who are now in that position. But being at home, being in lockdown, means that children have been online a lot more, and not just for school. Schooling wasn't happening from 9 till 3 every day online, and at the same time parents are working from home, there are siblings at home, so are those children being supervised when they are using the internet? And parents should be in the room when children are using those video platforms, should be monitoring. But in daily life, that's not necessarily something you're able to do. And as Julie was saying, there's these online sessions that have cropped up, and the links and the passwords are being shared very publicly, very widespread to hundreds of thousands of people. I did some research into just one post that was being shared out to thousands of people across the whole of Southeast London in public groups. And it's just there's no regard for safeguarding, but it's not understanding that having safeguarding training for being in a room with children where you can physically protect them in that space is very, very different from delivering training or sessions online. And it's, people are very defensive when you ask them what their safeguarding protocols are for these sessions, because in their mind they have safeguarding training and they may be DBS checked, but they don't have training for teaching online. They've just been thrown into it the same as the rest of us. And there's a real just lack of cyber awareness, and that's really the key issue, is that lack of cyber awareness on everybody's part. And people are sharing information they shouldn't be, people are falling for a lot more scams, they're just online more they're seeing a lot more. I mean, ridiculous number of scams that cropped up immediately. You know, emails coming from the World Health Organization. You know, click here to get your free testing kits, and you know, downloading malicious files immediately. And it, you know, scammers do take. And you know, they look for any vulnerabilities, and they're going to be, you know, I can't think of the words that I need, but yeah, there were a lot of scams that were specific to the pandemic. You know, sharing things and requests for support for vaccines, and the price gouging that happened when, you know, toilet paper was in demand and selling for £10 a roll on Amazon, and you know, fake products being sold. And so it's just it's a bit of a wild west. When
I think one of the big things there is that as adults, a lot of people have fall for these scams. You know, you've got to put yourself in the place of a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old who is, you know, just capable of reading and learning, and you know, they take these things at face value because it mirrors what they're seeing on the TV as well. And if they, you know, if they are overhearing the news being, you know, and things like that, these things get reinforced. And what I think the main thing here is the lack of awareness and training that all our teachers and all these people who are providing online services. You know, the presenters have not had the training to be able to, you know, successfully deliver a safe environment for kids.
Yeah, and I think you often think that teachers know everything because they're in that position of authority within the school. But oftentimes, as Sam mentioned, you know, the teachers have been thrown in at this at the deep end, and they don't have necessarily the skills and the knowledge and the awareness to navigate some of these challenges. So yeah, I guess it's about sessions like this to make people aware and to kind of get some of these messages across, and hopefully that kind of helps in some way. So that kind of leads me to the next subject, actually, and it's something that, you know, happened at school when I was at school was bullying, but you know, I didn't have to cope with cyberbullying. I mean, bullying at school ended at the school gate typically, but nowadays, I guess, with the access to the internet and social media all the time, cyberbullying is a real concern, and not just for children that are subject to being bullied, but obviously children that are the bullier, are perpetrating the bullying. So what advice would you give to parents or children who suspect that their children or friends may be subject to bullying or may be carrying out the bullying? And I'm going to ask Sam to comment first on that one, please.
Well, just to sort of clarify, cyberbullying, again, it is just bullying that takes place online, and it can be harassment, you know, trolling, just making, you know, unpleasant comments, cyber stalking, and you see a lot of catfishing, especially with sort of younger teens. It's that, you know, pretending to be a friend to get information, or you know, so there's different ways of that bullying is carried out online, and it's so prevalent because it's easy. There is that level of anonymity. You know, everything online is possible to do anonymously, and for children as well, you know, who don't have the means to kind of, you know, reverse search things and find out, you know, who people are, and that can be very, you know, very detrimental to mental health, to know that, you know, because they might be being bullied with information that only someone from school might know. So then who is that? And then that's a, you know, a real issue for mental health. It can happen anywhere at any time. You know, as you said, it doesn't just stop at the school gates. This is going on all the time, and the audience is a lot wider. You know, your harassment is being viewed by the world. You know, these comments are there for everyone to see, and I think that there's a real degree of separation with face-to-face bullying. You're there in front of the person that you are bullying. There is that connection. with the separation of the over the internet, it's very easy to kind of forget that who somebody is and the fact that they are a person and they do have feelings, and you know, you don't see them cry and break down and have those feelings. So it's very difficult for parents to understand what's going on sometimes, for schools as well, because children don't want to admit that they're being bullied. You know, who does, you know? So it's it can be very difficult and ongoing. And if it's your, you know, it's your whole life, it's every day at school, and then after school, and at the weekends, and in the holidays. And you know, if you're getting bombarded with these messages or pictures or comments about you online, it's very difficult to step away from that. You know, when and you know how important it is to have your devices. You know, you don't want to, you know, it's, I know a lot of sort of adults would say, well, don't look at it, or just delete it and put it away. But actually it has much more of a lasting effect on mental health than just, oh, okay, I'll delete that message that I've been sent, or I'll delete that picture that's been put up. Well, actually you can't delete those things. They're on the internet, and they're on the internet forever, you know. So there's that permanency. Sorry, I've got a cat coming in. So yeah, but there is support available. But I would say that the first port of call for parent is to talk to their child and find out exactly what it is that's going on, and actually not saying, well, just delete it and ignore it. You need to keep that evidence, because you do actually, you have that evidence in the case of cyberbullying that you maybe don't have in physical bullying. It's keeping that evidence, keeping a log of what's happening, and then taking it to the school if it's an issue that is, you know, arising from school. And it's okay to not know how to deal with it. There are support networks in place for parents and for children, so you don't have to know everything. You don't have to feel like you know. It's okay to say to your children, I don't know how to deal with this, let's find out. You know, I think it's important that children know that parents don't necessarily know everything about the internet and how to fix things, because it's like with teachers as well. You know, you think that teachers know everything about everything, and actually it can be quite stressful when an adult that you believe knows everything doesn't know how to fix it. And you know, yeah, I just think that that's really important for children to know, that sometimes parents need support too with these things.
Great.
I think it's important that children go on a journey with the parent with them, to discover and understand what, you know, not just with bullying, but with anything that's inappropriate online. You know, I mean, there are so many channels now how children can be bullied online, from all the different social media applications, all the different chat apps that are out there. And it's important that you know, if as a parent you recognise that, you know, your child is starting to behave differently, or has mood swings, or has you know, is very protective of devices, you know, goes through, you know, I mean, it could be very subtle changes over quite some time. But the thing is, as a parent, is to be able to recognise and first communicate, and then find and work through with, you know, professionals, be it, you know, with the school or with through the police, if you know, if it depends on the severity and the frequency that you know, the police may need to get involved. But it's important that the child is reassured and goes along with the you know, with the involvement of parents and, you know, grandparents and things like that. That it's not just a hidden. You know, I think a lot of what goes on online is actually hidden from adults, and the important thing is to break that hidden barrier.
Thank you everybody. And I mean, this is such an interesting topic, and I think we've only just really scratched the surface. But as always, kind of time's on our side. So so what we're going to do now is just go around the virtual table, if you like, and just hear everybody's final thoughts and advice, and maybe any kind of recommendations of resources that you've seen help families and children. So I'm going to start over with you, Simon, if that's okay.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I mean, I guess the takeaway for me, and I think this is something that both Stuart, Julie, and Sam have just talked about, it's about sitting down with your children and having that conversation. My kids, always ask me about technology, and 9 times out of 10, I don't know the answer. But I'm clear with them that I don't know the answer, and I will go away and find the answer. So I admit firsthand that even though I work in technology day in, day out, there are things that I just simply don't know the answer to. And I think it's important to sit down with your children and others that you may care for, and just have those conversations about how they feel in terms of using that technology, what sort of things they're looking at, how are they finding it, are there things that cause them any worry and any problems. And I think by having those conversations, your children are far more likely to come forward to you with any issues that they have. And I like to think that my kids feel quite empowered. So I know now whenever they're on the internet and something pops up, and it might be just to agree to a privacy statement, instead of just clicking accept, they'll come to me first and say, Dad, can you read this? What does it mean? And we have a little chat about it. And it only takes a minute, but it's just nice to have that little conversation with them, that they understand what they're doing, so they understand when they're on the internet what to look for and what not to look for. And I think that's the most powerful thing you can do. And I think, as the others have said as well, I would certainly have a conversation with your school, with youth clubs, with things like the Cubs and Scouts, etc., and any other movement where your children belong, just to sort of understand a little bit more about what they do to keep those children safe online, and just get to understand and speak to them directly. And I think the more information you can get, the better, the more informed that you can be, again, the better, and the more helpful conversations you have with children. So for me, it's about having those conversations. Don't blanket ban stuff. I think that's really important, but have a conversation and talk people through it.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And Julie, I'm going to hand over to you at this point, please.
I would say pretty much that I think we should make sure as parents that we do keep them only on age appropriate things. I mean, that's it. That's where a lot of problems creep in. With the bullying, obviously, with messaging and everything. There's a lot of things that they shouldn't be on with a TikTok. Okay, it's okay, everybody else is. It's too late. Once the screenshot has been done, you're on there for life, and it is shared and shared and shared. Please be very careful on what your children are looking at. We don't send them across the road on their own when they're very young, do we? So why do we allow them on the internet?
So true, thank you. And Sam, over to you, please.
There is support available to both children and adults who are affected by things that they've seen on the internet, things they've experienced on the internet. Childline is obviously the obvious one that most people know about. There's also the Mix and Young Minds, both for children. There's PACE UK, which is for parents of children who have been or are at risk of sexual exploitation. So for those parents who need advice about grooming, if potential signs and things, but if a child is at immediate risk from things, then calling 999 or calling 101 if you think that you need advice about potential crimes that are happening online, because that's what these are. Online grooming, it's a crime. The cyberbullying, it's a crime. So it is a case of treating it as such. Just because it's happening online doesn't mean it shouldn't be treated differently to if it was happening to you face to face.
Perfect, thank you. And finally, Stuart, over to you for your closing thoughts, please.
Well, it's very much about the visual and the online, be it photos or videos. I think that as has already been said, once they're created and once they're shared online, potentially they're there for life. And one of the things I would recommend anybody looking at is to look at the Internet Watch Foundation and the work that they do. With the removal of harmful content, and now they're sort of trying to work globally, and the understanding that those photographs of those child victims invariably, they just keep seeing them day after day after day after day, and these things get shared all over the place. So it's just one of the common things in social media is to have little apps that put filters on top of photographs, potentially, oh, isn't this fun, or isn't this funny, or whatever, and potentially hide, inappropriate parts from being displayed on the internet. However, filters can go on, but they can also be removed. So if you take a photograph or a video that's been filtered, you can actually take out the filter and see the raw content. So just be very aware what apps you use. They need to be from a reputable organization. It's just safety first all the time. Privacy, safety, and safeguarding are the main watchwords, I'd say.
Fantastic, thank you. So that does bring us to the end, and as I say, it's a really interesting topic, and I think we could probably continue this discussion for a lot longer. But I want to say a big thank you to Stuart, Julie, Sam, and Simon. Thanks for all the work you're doing in this space as well. We will provide links to everybody that views this recording in our event page, and I just wanted to again iterate that if you've been affected by any of the discussions today, remember there is support for you. At Refinitiv we have our employee assistance program, and we've got our event page where we'll be posting links for additional resource and support. So again, thank you very much to our panel. It's been a great session, and we hope everybody gain some good understanding and awareness on this subject. Thank you.